Hello, I am Bigfoot 24, a rescue volunteer. I'm usually the guy you call when things go wrong. I've always been good at responding quickly. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just action. I've seen my share of trouble and I know how to deal with it. At least that's what I thought until tonight. It was a quiet evening. I was at the small rescue station just outside the national forest going through routine checks on our emergency gear. I'd almost finished inspecting the flashlights when my phone rang. The sharp tone sliced through the silence like a blade. "Bigfoot here," I said, voice firm, trained to stay calm under pressure. "Hey, Bigfoot, it's Mark," said the voice on the other end, tight with worry. Mark was one of the local park rangers. He never called unless something was serious. "What's going on?" "We've got someone missing in the forest, Julia Monroe. She went hiking alone earlier today and no one's seen or heard from her since. Her phone's dead. We just found her car parked near the old Pine Ridge trailhead." "Julia Monroe?" I repeated, my heart skipping a beat. "That's Sam's mom, isn't it?" "Yeah, that's her." "You know her?" Mark asked. "Just sort of," I replied, my mind racing. "I'll head out immediately." After hanging up, I quickly grabbed my gear, flashlight, first aid kit, emergency blanket, compass radio, and extra batteries. My adrenaline spiked, hands moving fast and steady as I packed. I'd done this 100 times, but tonight felt different. Julia wasn't just a random hiker. She was someone I knew, or rather someone I'd admired from afar. Julia was my friend's mom. She was beautiful, gentle, but kind of quiet and definitely not the type you'd expect to wander off alone into the woods. I'd seen her countless times around town or at Sam's house. She always seemed so composed, graceful, and distant in a way that intrigued me. Sam had once mentioned her divorce, describing how Julia had become withdrawn and lonely ever since. I'd never given it much thought until now. I loaded my gear into my old Jeep and drove swiftly toward Pine Ridge, heart hammering in my chest. The forest loomed ahead, dark and impenetrable under the starless sky. My headlights barely cut through the heavy darkness, making everything feel 10 times more urgent. Julia was out there alone, possibly injured or frightened. The image made my grip tighten on the steering wheel. I parked at the trailhead and hopped out. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Immediately, I noticed Julia's car parked at an angle as if she had left in a hurry. No time to lose, I grabbed my gear and headed straight into the woods. The beam of my flashlight swung across the trail as I moved quickly, eyes scanning for any clue. Branches snapped under my boots, the quiet crunch echoing like thunder in my ears. Every shadow felt alive. Each rustle in the trees, a silent reminder that I was racing against time. "Julia," I called, my voice sharp yet hopeful. "Only silence," replied the woods, absorbing my shout without echo. A few minutes later, something caught my eye. A flash of white in the dirt ahead. Kneeling down, I picked it up. It was a scarf, pale and delicate, the kind Julia often wore. My heart thudded. She had been here. The scarf felt strangely warm in my hands, as if it had only just fallen from her neck. A chill raced down my spine. I moved faster, desperation fueling my steps. As I followed the trail, further doubts crept in. Why had she come out here alone? Was she running from something, or was she trying to escape a memory that haunted her? Either way, the idea made me uneasy. Julia had always seemed too calm and collected for rash decisions. Something about this whole situation didn't sit right with me. Deeper into the forest, the trail narrowed and twisted. I shouted her name again, louder, urgency sharpening my tone. The silence of the woods pressed heavily around me. I felt my stomach tighten. What if I was too late? The trail abruptly ended, swallowed by a dense thicket of trees. Frustrated, I aimed the flashlight around, searching desperately. It was then I noticed a faint trail of disturbed earth and broken twigs veering off the main path and leading deeper into darkness. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the thick branches, feeling scratches against my skin, ignoring the discomfort. Every step forward was heavier, the sense of urgency growing unbearable. She was close. I could feel it. Then, just as doubt threatened to creep in again, I saw her. She was huddled beneath a large oak tree, knees drawn up tightly to her chest. Her clothes were dirty, her face pale, streaked with mud and tears. Julia looked small and fragile, completely unlike the poised woman I'd always seen. "Julia," I shouted, relief washing through me like a wave. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, startled, and filled with fear. "Bigfoot," her voice trembled, barely a whisper. I rushed to her side, quickly kneeling down. "Are you hurt?" I asked, assessing her with careful eyes. She shook her head weakly, but I saw the small scrape on her knee, the shivering of her frame. Quickly, I wrapped the emergency blanket around her, feeling the coldness of her skin through the thin fabric. "I got lost," she admitted softly, voice shaking. "I thought I knew the trail, but then it got dark so quickly." "Hey, it's all right," I reassured her, my voice steady and calm. "You're safe now. I've got you." Our eyes locked in the dim glow of the flashlight, a heavy silence settling around us. Something unspoken passed between us, powerful and strangely intimate. I realized suddenly that I had never truly looked at her this closely before. Despite the fear and exhaustion etched into her features, Julia remained strikingly beautiful. But it was the vulnerability in her eyes that hit me hardest. She shivered again, and instinctively I moved closer, putting my arm around her shoulders for warmth. Her breath hitched slightly at my touch, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she seemed to lean into me just slightly, as if trusting me was something far deeper than just her safety. In that tense, quiet moment under the ancient oak, I knew something had shifted. I'd been in rescue missions dozens of times, but this was different. Julia was no longer just Sam's mom. She was a woman fragile yet brave, haunted yet hopeful. And I, Bigfoot, was not just a volunteer doing his job. I was someone she had trusted in her darkest moment. As the forest surrounded us, quiet and watchful, I tightened my grip around her shoulders, silently, vowing to keep her safe no matter what happened next. I carefully examined Julia's scraped knee in the glow of my flashlight, noticing the shallow cut wasn't serious, but it needed cleaning to avoid infection. She winced slightly as I dabbed antiseptic onto the wound, but remained silent, eyes fixed somewhere in the distance, lost in thought. The forest around us had grown colder, and darkness pressed in like a heavy blanket. It was obvious we wouldn't be making our way back tonight. Julia was too weak, too shaken, and the risk of getting further lost in the dark was simply too great. "We'll have to stay here until dawn," I said gently, trying not to alarm her. She nodded softly, biting her lip, looking fragile, yet trying hard not to show it. "I'm sorry, Bigfoot," she whispered. "This must be a burden for you." I smiled warmly, shaking my head. "It's never a burden to help someone, especially someone like you." She glanced at me quickly. I moved, gathering branches and dry leaves from nearby to build a temporary shelter. Julia watched me silently, her eyes following every move I made. I worked swiftly, using the skills I'd learned through countless nights in the wilderness, forming a small lean-to beneath the sturdy branches of the giant oak that sheltered us. "Sit here," I said, guiding Julia gently inside. She obeyed quietly, wrapping the emergency blanket tightly around her shoulders, still shivering slightly. I started a small fire, the dry twigs igniting quickly, casting a comforting warmth and light around us. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the flames dance. The soft crackling sound brought some reassurance to our uncertain situation. I glanced at Julia. Her gaze was fixed deeply into the fire, her expression distant. "Julia," I finally ventured softly, breaking the silence. "Why did you come out here alone?" "It's dangerous," she hesitated, her lips parting as if searching for the right words. Eventually, she sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I guess I was trying to escape. Or maybe I was trying to find something myself. Maybe escape from what I asked, gently careful not to push too hard." "My past," she replied, voice barely audible over the fire's soft whispers. "My marriage ended a year ago. You probably know that already." I nodded slowly. Sam mentioned it once, but he never really talked about it. Julia gave a sad smile, eyes glistening in the firelight. "That's because I never talk about it. I pretend I'm fine because that's what people expect." They see a strong, independent woman raising her son, doing everything alone. But inside, her voice trailed off. Inside, I prompted gently. Inside, I'm lost, Bigfoot, she admitted softly, eyes brimming with unshed tears. I've never felt so alone, even surrounded by people. My marriage wasn't just a failure. It broke something in me, something I don't know how to fix. I watched her quietly, my heart suddenly heavy with empathy. I'd never imagined Julia carrying such hidden pain. To me, she'd always appeared composed and confident, almost unbreakable. But seeing her now vulnerable and hurting made me realize how much strength she'd shown just to hold it together. She blinked rapidly, wiping away tears that had silently begun to fall. I came here thinking the woods could give me answers, she said bitterly. But instead, they reminded me how lost I really am. Without thinking, I removed my jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders, covering the thin emergency blanket. Julia looked at me in surprise, her eyes wide with sudden vulnerability. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. "You're a good man, Bigfoot." I smiled faintly, feeling warmth rise inside me, not just from the fire. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said softly. "Not tonight. Everyone gets lost. Sometimes even someone as strong as you." Julia looked up, eyes searching mine as if she could see right through me. Her voice was gentle, uncertain. "Do you really think I'm strong?" "Of course I do," I replied earnestly. "You've raised an incredible son, kept your life together through everything. You're allowed to feel broken sometimes." Her shoulder shook gently, and before I knew it, Julia was quietly sobbing, unable to hold back the emotions she'd hidden away for so long. Instinctively, I moved closer, hesitating only briefly before gently placing my arm around her trembling shoulders. Julia stiffened momentarily, but quickly relaxed into my embrace, her head resting lightly against my chest. I felt her tears soak into my shirt, the warmth of her body pressing softly against mine. It was strange, the intimacy born from vulnerability, from shared pain. My heart pounded fiercely, not from fear or anxiety, but from something entirely different, something deeper and more complex. We sat together quietly, neither of us speaking, listening to the crackle of the fire, the distant rustle of leaves, and the gentle rhythmic breathing as Julia gradually calmed. The world outside seemed distant, meaningless. For now, it was just the two of us alone, but together, both of us lost in our own way, yet somehow finding comfort in one another. Eventually, Julia's breathing evened out, becoming slow and steady. She had fallen asleep, curled against me, the lines of worry easing from her face as rest took hold. I adjusted my position carefully, ensuring she stayed warm and comfortable, her soft breathing warm against my skin. In the stillness, as the flames burned low, I found myself looking down at her sleeping face, illuminated by the dying embers. In that moment, I felt a sudden, profound tenderness. This wasn't just compassion, and certainly not pity or obligation. It was something else entirely. Something unexpected and undeniable. Julia was no longer just Sam's mom, no longer just a rescue mission. She was someone who had opened up to me in her weakest moment, allowing me to see beyond her careful facade. She trusted me enough to share her pain, to lean on me, even if just for this one night. As I held her close, shielding her from the chill and the darkness, I realized something within me had shifted permanently. A quiet, powerful feeling settled deep inside my chest, spreading warmth through every part of me. Looking down at Julia's peaceful face, framed gently in firelight, I knew this night had changed everything. It was no longer about duty or responsibility. It was about her beautiful, gentle wounded, and the realization that I cared for her more deeply than I'd ever expected. As dawn slowly approached, chasing away the darkness, I remained awake, holding Julia, guarding her sleep and silently coming to terms with the truth stirring inside me. Sunlight filtered softly through the leaves, casting gentle patterns across the forest floor. The chirping of birds replaced the silence of the night, waking me from a half-sleep state. As I slowly opened my eyes, I realized Julia was still nestled close to me, her head resting softly against my shoulder. A wave of tenderness washed over me, mixed with the cautious awareness of our newfound closeness. At that moment, Julia stirred gently, her eyes blinking open. She looked up at me, confusion flickering briefly across her face before being replaced by a soft blush of embarrassment. "Oh, Bigfoot, I'm sorry," she murmured, moving quickly to sit upright. "I didn't realize." "It's okay," I interrupted softly, smiling reassuringly. "You needed the rest." Julia's gaze dropped shyly and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She seemed comforted by my words, but still carried a quiet hesitance. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine again. "For everything." "You're welcome," I said sincerely, ready to start heading back. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, I'm ready." After quickly putting out the remaining embers of our campfire and packing up our things, we began the trek back toward the rescue station. The morning air was fresh and crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and earth. And the atmosphere between us had changed, grown more comfortable, more open. As we walked side by side through the awakening forest, Julia spoke quietly, her voice calm but earnest. "Last night I said a lot. I hope it didn't make you feel uncomfortable." I responded immediately, shaking my head firmly. "I was glad you trusted me enough to open up." Julia's eyes softened and she looked away briefly as though choosing her words carefully. "It's been a long time since I felt I could trust anyone that way. I've always tried to be strong, especially in front of Sam. He needs me to be strong." "You are strong," I replied, glancing at her. "But everyone has moments when they need someone to lean on. There's no shame in that." She looked at me again, warmth radiating from her gaze. "You're wise beyond your years, Bigfoot." I chuckled lightly, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Just speaking the truth. Besides, you've always been someone I've respected and admired from afar." Julia seemed surprised, eyebrows slightly raised. "Really? I had no idea you felt that way." I hesitated briefly, then spoke with quiet determination. "I never saw you as just my friend's mom. You're a beautiful woman who deserves happiness." She stopped walking momentarily, her eyes searching my face as if trying to determine whether my words were genuine. Her expression softened slowly, and she smiled shyly, clearly touched by my honesty. "You've got quite a way with words," she finally said, voice gentle. "It's been a very long time since anyone spoke to me like that." "It's only the truth," I said, my voice firm yet gentle. "You deserve to hear it." Julia seemed lost in thought and we continued walking quietly for a while. I wondered if I had overstepped, but soon she broke the silence, speaking softly. "Bigfoot, do you ever feel unsure about where you're headed? Like you're searching for something but don't know exactly what it is?" I nodded slowly, recognizing her struggle. "Of course, I think we all feel that way sometimes. Life's not always clear." Julia sighed gently, eyes focused thoughtfully ahead. "When I got divorced, I thought I would finally know exactly who I was and what I wanted. But the truth is, I felt more lost than ever. That's why I came into the woods yesterday. I thought the solitude would help me find answers." "And did it?" I asked gently. She glanced sideways at me, her eyes sincere and open. "Not exactly, but maybe it led me to something better." I caught her meaning and felt my heart quicken, warmth spreading through me. Before I could respond, Julia suddenly slipped on a patch of damp moss, stumbling forward. Reacting quickly, I reached out, catching her firmly by the waist before she could fall. For a brief, intense moment, we stood pressed close together, faces mere inches apart, breaths mingling softly. Our eyes met in a powerful, wordless understanding passed between us. Julia's eyes widened slightly, then softened, a vulnerable trust filling them. My pulse quickened at her nearness, and I knew she felt it too. The intimacy born of shared danger. Quiet conversations and unexpected vulnerability. Slowly, gently, I steadied her on her feet. But even after regaining her balance, she didn't immediately pull away, instead letting the moment linger, eyes still locked onto mine. "Are you okay?" I whispered softly, unable to look away from her face. "Yes," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Thanks to you." After a moment longer, she finally stepped back, cheeks tinged pink, a quiet smile on her lips. We continued walking, but now with a new electric silence hanging between us, unspoken feelings quietly acknowledged, yet left gently suspended. Eventually, we reached the familiar clearing near the rescue station. As the small wooden building came into view, I felt a strange heaviness settle over me. The morning had brought us safety, but it also meant the end of this closeness we'd shared. My heart felt conflicted, caught between relief at our safety and the uncertainty of what came next. At the edge of the clearing, I stopped turning to face her. "Here we are," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're safe now." Julia nodded slowly, glancing toward the rescue station before looking back at me. There was a quiet hesitation in her eyes, as if she was wrestling with something internally. My heart clenched, slightly, preparing myself to say goodbye. "I guess this is it," I added gently, trying to hide the reluctance in my voice. Julia took a deep breath as though gathering courage. Just as I began to turn away, she suddenly reached out gently, taking hold of my hand, her touch warm and unexpected. "Bigfoot," she said quietly, her voice filled with tentative sincerity. "Would you mind seeing me again when we're not lost in the woods?" My heart skipped, warmth spreading rapidly through my chest. I squeezed her hand gently, smiling warmly. "I'd like that very much, Julia," I replied softly, looking deep into her eyes. "More than you know." Her smile brightened, lighting up her face beautifully. We lingered a moment longer, hands gently clasped, an unspoken promise hanging between us. Finally, we released each other's hands and began walking toward the rescue station side by side, knowing something had changed irrevocably between us. We might have been leaving the forest behind, but the emotional journey we'd embarked upon together had only just begun. Several days passed after that unforgettable night in the woods, but the memories lingered vividly in my mind. I replayed the scenes countless times, the intensity of our conversations, the vulnerability in Julia's eyes, and the undeniable spark of connection we both felt. Julia had texted me the night before asking if we could meet at a small cafe near the edge of town, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. When I arrived at the cafe, Julia was already waiting at a corner table by the window. Soft afternoon sunlight bathed her face, highlighting her graceful features. She smiled warmly when our eyes met, a smile filled with relief, nervousness, and something deeper that mirrored my own feelings. "Hey," I greeted softly, pulling out the chair opposite her. "Hi," she replied, voice gentle and welcoming. "I'm glad you came." I smiled warmly, the tension in my chest easing at the sight of her. I wouldn't miss it for the world. For a few moments, we simply sat quietly, looking at each other, unsure of how to begin. Finally, Julia broke the silence, stirring her coffee nervously. "I haven't stopped thinking about that night," she confessed softly. I nodded, my own voice, quiet but firm. "Neither have I. It feels surreal, but it also feels right." She hesitated, glancing down at her hands and back up to meet my eyes. "I've worried about this, Bigfoot. About us, about our age difference. People will talk. They might not understand." Her voice trembled slightly, a reflection of genuine concern. I reached across the table, gently taking her hand in mine, determined to convey my sincerity. "It doesn't matter," I said softly, clearly. "What matters is how we feel. People will always find reasons to judge, but their opinions shouldn't define us." Julia looked up, eyes searching mine carefully. "Are you sure you're so young, Bigfoot? You have your whole life ahead of you." I squeezed her hand lightly, holding her gaze with quiet intensity. "I know exactly what I'm feeling. Age has nothing to do with understanding or connection. What matters is the person. And Julia, you're the person who makes me feel seen, who makes me feel like I belong." She seemed momentarily speechless, eyes glistening as she absorbed my words. Finally, a gentle smile formed on her lips, and she whispered, "You have no idea how much that means to me." We spent the next hour at the cafe openly sharing the feelings we'd kept hidden in the forest. Things that had seemed too intimate, too raw to admit fully at that moment. We talked freely about our fears, our hopes, and our unexpected journey toward each other. The more we spoke, the clearer it became that what we had found was something special and rare, born from shared vulnerability and honest compassion. As we left the cafe, walking slowly toward the lakeside path nearby, I felt a new sense of resolve settle within me. There would undoubtedly be challenges, judgments from others, difficult conversations, but none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was this: the quiet understanding, the warmth of her presence beside me. Julia walked closely beside me, our arms occasionally brushing together in unspoken closeness blossoming between us. Her steps were lighter, her eyes brighter, as if the burden she'd carried for so long had finally begun to lift. "You know," she began softly, "since that night in the forest, I feel like something's changed in me. Like I've been given permission to live again, not just exist." I glanced at her warmly, deeply touched by her honesty. "You deserve to be happy, Julia, and I want to be the person who helps you find that happiness." She stopped, suddenly turning toward me fully on the path, her eyes full of sincere emotion. "You already have Bigfoot more than you realize." Our gazes held for a long, meaningful moment, an acknowledgement passing silently between us. Julia was finally letting go of the pain that had held her back, embracing the possibility of love and companionship again. In turn, I found myself experiencing feelings I'd never imagined, emotions so genuine and deep that they surprised even me. As we continued along the path, Julia slipped slightly closer, her fingers gently brushing against mine before intertwining our hands together naturally, as though we'd done it 100 times before. The simple act felt profound, a silent pledge between us to support each other no matter what lay ahead. We reached the edge of the lake, its surface reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun, painting everything around us in hues of warm gold and gentle pink. The quiet beauty of the scene seemed perfectly fitting for the quiet sincerity of what we were feeling. Bigfoot, Julia spoke quietly, looking out at the tranquil water. "What do you think the future holds for us?" I paused thoughtfully, squeezing her hand gently as I answered truthfully. "I don't know exactly. Nobody ever really does. But what I do know is how I feel right now, right here with you. That feels real. That feels important." Julia turned to face me again, her expression open and honest. "It does, doesn't it?" I nodded, holding her gaze tenderly. "And I'm not afraid of what anyone might say. Let them talk. We found something that feels right, and that's all that matters to me." Her eyes softened visibly, a newfound confidence shining brightly in them. "You're incredibly brave, Bigfoot. I envy your courage." I smiled warmly, shaking my head. "You're the one who's brave. You took the first step toward letting someone into your heart again." She laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. "Maybe we're both brave in our own ways." We stood quietly, absorbing the gentle beauty of the sunset, lost in the comfort of each other's company. After a long, peaceful silence, Julia squeezed my hand gently and began walking again, pulling me along with her. "I don't know what the future holds," she repeated softly, turning to look deeply into my eyes, her smile radiant in the fading sunlight. "But right now, this feels right." My heart surged at her words, a profound sense of contentment filling me. Without speaking, I gently squeezed her hand back, affirming my silent agreement and the promise it carried. Together, hand in hand, we continued down the lakeside path, the gentle colors of the twilight sky reflecting across the water surface. The future stretched ahead of us, uncertain yet inviting, filled with possibilities that neither of us could yet fully imagine. But we didn't need to know exactly what would come next. All we needed was this moment: the courage to embrace our connection, the trust to follow our hearts, and the hope that our shared feelings would guide us toward happiness. As we walked slowly into the peaceful evening, I knew with absolute certainty that our journey together had just begun. Defined not by age or circumstance, but by something far deeper, a genuine, courageous love that no judgment or obstacle could diminish. The story of Bigfoot and Julia reveals a powerful life lesson. True courage lies in embracing vulnerability, even when it feels like the scariest leap of all. Bigfoot, a young rescue volunteer, doesn't just pull Julia from the physical dangers of a dark forest. He becomes the safe haven where she can unravel the loneliness and pain she's carried since her divorce. Julia, a woman who masked her brokenness with grace, finds in Bigfoot's unwavering presence a chance to heal, to trust, and to love again. Their journey teaches us that life's most meaningful connections often arise in moments of raw honesty when we dare to share our fears and let someone see us flaws and all. It's a reminder that we all get lost sometimes, not just in the wilderness, but in our own hearts. And it takes immense bravery to let someone guide us back. Bigfoot's resolve to stay by Julia's side and her courage to open up show us that love and understanding can transcend age, judgment, or circumstance. In our own lives, how often do we hold back, fearing rejection or misunderstanding? This story urges us to take the risk to reach out and to trust that someone will meet us halfway. Have you ever found connection in an unexpected moment of vulnerability? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how it shaped you. If this tale stirred your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that inspire us to embrace our fears and find love in the unexpected. Your support fuels this journey. Join our community of dreamers and doers today.